And hello YouTube, this is GSmaniamsmart and I'm making a brand new video for tutorials with GS. Now today's tutorial we're going to be focusing on Adobe After Effects CC. And we're going to be talking about creating your composition and animation. Now, animation is one of the key things in After Effects that a lot of people are going to be using it for. If you have After Effects, you're probably going to be using animation in almost all of your projects. It's one of the most fundamental things to understand in After Effects because that's what video making is all about, animating things in your video. It's moving picture, it's animation. So that's going to be our topic for today. But since this is still part of one of the early videos in my playlist of After Effects, we're also going to be talking about creating your composition. So when you open After Effects, you always come up with this screen right here. Now if you don't want this screen to come up, you can always click Show Welcome Screen as Startup. You can always uncheck this and you can close it and this won't come up. But for those of you who have this come up, all of your recent projects will be right here, and you can start a new project with here. But we're going to go ahead and click close. Now if you ever want to start a new composition, you'll see that you have no compositions here. You're basically working with nothing. A new composition is basically a new video file that you're going to be creating into. You're going to be creating a new video file from this composition. So you go to composition and new composition. Now, as I said in my first After Effects videos, there's a difference between composition and video footage. Your composition is where your video footage goes into. Your composition is not your video footage. Your video footage goes into the composition. So, generally speaking, you want to select a preset here because it basically adjusts all this for you. Now generally speaking, if you're making a YouTube video, you're going to be working with these right here. Most of this up here, this is for web, and these right here are usually for broadcast. But now that we're in the HD era, everyone's using these presets right here. So for YouTube, we're going to go HD 1080 29.97, which is we have the resolution here and we have the frames here. Now you can change all this if you like, but most of the time if you pick a preset, everything will basically work for you fine from there on. Now the start time is obviously going to be 000. Now the duration of this, you can change this. We're going to be creating a composition today that's going to be 10 seconds long, so it's going to be that's actually a minute long. If you make a mistake, you can click composition settings, and we did not want it to be 1 minute. We want it to be 10 seconds. And we actually want this to be 1920 by 1080. Alright, there we go. So we're working in 1080p resolution. If you ever want to change something else in your composition, you go to composition settings. That's basically how you do composition. But another thing that I want to stress real quick is if you go into your edit, if you're on a Mac, it's going to be under the After Effects button. But if you're on Windows, it's going to be under edit. You go to preferences and you go to general. One thing that I do want to touch on, whenever you undo things in After Effects, there's going to be levels of undo. You can change this value if you ever want to undo more, undo less. However, I suggest keeping this the same. But one thing that you really want to make sure you understand is if you go into Media and Disk Cache, what you want to do here is set up a folder which will basically allow After Effects to render videos so you don't need to constantly, when you RAM preview things, it doesn't need to store into your memory, you can actually store it onto your hard drive. So you want to create a folder. For example, if you choose folder here, for example, my folder is in the temp folder. Now, most likely yours is probably going to be here too, but if you ever want to change your folder, make sure you have enabled disk cache checkmarked, and make sure you have a folder for your disk cache, because that will make previewing your files a lot quicker. Another thing, you want to go into memory and multiprocessing. One thing you want to have is you want to checkmark render multiple frames simultaneously, and you want to have only for render queue, not for RAM preview. You want to have both of these checkmarked, and I could go into depth and explain, what each of these means, but basically just understand that having both of these checkmarked will basically give your After Effects performance and quality. It won't go slow, and it'll also keep your quality pretty good. Now you can change how much RAM you want to allocate for After Effects. You can change the amount, but I'm going to keep mine the way it is. Also, you can change the CPU usage. If you want to keep CPU for other programs, you can change this CPU to however many CPU cores you want to have. For other programs, for other applications, I have 0 reserved, because usually when I'm rendering, I'm not really doing anything else. But you can change this as well. But those are just a few things that I suggest you do before you work on After Effects, and this is a one-time thing. You only need to do this one time, and for the rest of your time when using After Effects for that computer, you don't need to do it anymore. So now we're actually going to go on to the animation part. So what we're basically going to be creating today, we're going to be creating an intro, sort of. It's going to be, well, it could be considered an intro, or it could be considered a transition. But we're basically going to be creating a 10-second video footage file that will basically show the user what's coming up next in the video. And there's going to be lots of animation included in this, so let's go ahead and get started. So we have our composition created. Now we're going to need to import some files. So we're going to go to Files, and we're going to go to Import, File, and I'm going to be selecting this file right here. And when it imports, and this is going to be our background file. Now if you see that your video file is not large enough, it doesn't fit the screen, what you can do is click a layer and then hold down, start dragging, and then hold down Shift so the aspect ratio stays the same. And if for some reason your video is not in the same, the video you're using is not in the same resolution, you can make it the same resolution by dragging it, like zooming in very close to it, making it bigger. But be aware that some of the video file on the top and the bottom is going to be cut off. In some cases you could do this, but it's going to distort the image. You can do it a little bit and not many people will notice it, but I would suggest not doing it because it does mess up the quality of your video. But we're just gonna do it a little bit, just a tad, and then the rest we're gonna drag out like that. Alright, so now remember our composition is 10 seconds long, so the entire video footage is well over a minute. So we're gonna need to pick the section we want, and the section I want to have for this a little introduction is this section right here where the waterfall starts. So we're just gonna scrub through until the beginning is the waterfall, which is right about here. And if we play this, this is going to be our 10-second intro here. This is going to be the background of it. So now we're going to do next is we're going to go ahead and add some text. Now if you have a graphic already created in Photoshop, you can import that graphic. You can go to File and oh come on, File. Will you not pop up? Okay, File, and you can go to Import, and you can go to right here, Files, and you can actually import your Photoshop files, because as you can see right here, these are all the file types that Adobe After Effects accepts. And if we scroll down to, where is it? So you can even include Cinema 4D. So a lot of different programs are compatible, but you can include PSDs as well. And PSDs are for the Photoshop. Here you go, Photoshop PSD. So you can import many different files. If you have an Illustrator file, you can include that as well, import that as well. But we have no Photoshop file. One thing that you should be aware of is that if you do import a Photoshop file, you will have all your layers there. So Photoshop and Adobe After Effects are very compatible, because all of your layers in Photoshop will transfer to Adobe After Effects, and you can animate each layer accordingly. Now, what we're going to do next is we're going to go ahead and add some text here. So our text tool right here, and we're going to add, say, what can we call this introduction? The nature of Earth. That's what we'll call it. And we're going to Control A to highlight, and we're going to make this text a little bigger right here. We're just going to drag it, and then we're going to use our move tool up here, and I think right about there is fine. And we're actually going to go ahead and include a stroke. And to include a stroke, I'm actually going to change the font first. Now, if you have a font that you specifically want, you can pick one. I'm just going to, randomly go through some of these. I need a pretty bulky one. You could also just go up and down between each font here, and you can preview it. You don't need to randomly just click one. We're actually gonna go with I saw one that I liked. Let's go with this one, and we're just gonna go ahead and make this a little bigger, like so. Now, actually, make it a little smaller. We don't need that big. And we're also going to create another text layer. And, oops, you want to make sure that you don't, make sure you click on your background layer. And we're going to name this part 1. And we're going to resize this pretty drastically. Make sure you have Control A selected so that everything's selected, and then right around there. And we're just gonna put this off to the side here. Maybe even, yeah, right around there. Now, one thing we'll notice is that if we go through this entire video, we'll see that the text is in this video throughout the entire time. Now we don't want that. We want the text to basically fade in so that it actually looks like it's not just there. It's not just dropped on top of it. We're going to expand our timeline a bit so we see our entire timeline, and you can do this by using this little tool here. The next thing we're going to do is basically edit our text layers so that each of them comes in at a specific time interval. Now, we're just going to go ahead and hide them with the eyeball tools over here. And I want them to come in right around maybe 2 seconds into the video. So right about here, we're going to go to 2 seconds. And when you're at the position that you want to start showing a layer, what you can do is drag the ends of this layer and drag it to the spot that you want it to. Now you could zoom in over here with this tool right here and make it very precise and accurate. But there is a much better way of doing this. In fact, what you can do is hold down the Alt key or the Option key on the Mac, and then hit the left bracket, and this will automatically bring the endpoint to the exact spot where your marker here is. And if you have several layers selected, it'll do it for all of them. So we'll hit the Alt and the left bracket, and it'll automatically trim it to the correct spot for the endpoint. Now for the out point, we're going to go ahead and get our eyeballs up here again. Now what we want to do is we want to have the first title come in first, and then maybe like half a second later, the second title come in. So we're going to go to around 2.5 seconds, and if you want to be very precise, you'll see that over here you can change the time, or over here you can change the time as well. Be aware that each second has 0.30. Well, basically has 30 milliseconds here. I don't even know what these are called. I just know that it's this number can only go to 29. So basically, if you want to go half, it'd be 15. So we're going to be very precise, and we're going to go to 2:15. So 2:15. And then we're going to go and get to our second layer, which is our part 1, which is the third layer here. Well, first layer, third layer is here. The first layer, which is part 1, and we're going to Alt and Endpoint, left bracket. Now what this will do, as you'll see, we'll see that as we go through part 1. Now if maybe I wanted to go a second later because it was pretty quickly, we'll just go set this to 0300, and we'll do the same thing, Alt left bracket. And if we watch this again real quick, Nature of Earth, part 1. Perfect. Now, if ever we're at a point we want this text to basically go away, we can do that as well. Say we want it to go away. Let's watch Nature of Earth, part 1. And we'll make it go away, say at 7 seconds. At 6.5 seconds. So, we'll go to 6:15. And we're going to go highlight both of these layers, and we're going to hit Alt, and this time we're going to hit the right bracket, and the right bracket will set the out point. And as you can see, the Nature of Earth, part 1, and it goes away. Now if you want to preview your composition without these little handles here, what you can do is just click on an area and not select any layers, and then you can watch the whole thing without any of those annoying handles, which basically allows you to resize everything. So now that we have that, one thing that I noticed is that when we watch this video footage, it's very clear here, and which is good. But when the text comes in, we want the viewer to focus on the text. We want the main focus of the video to be the text and not the background. Now obviously after the text, the background can continue to be the main focus, and before as well, but when the text comes in, we want the text to be the main focus. So what we're actually going to do is we're going to add a blur effect to the background. And the way we're going to do this is we're going to go ahead and select our background layer, which is our video file, and we're going to go to Effects. And as you see, all of After Effects effects are categorized into different sections. Now for our blur, we go to Blur and Sharpen, and we'll go to Fast Blur. Fast Blur is always a very quick to render and previews very quickly, and it's pretty simple as well. Now we're going to go ahead and zoom in here to fit up to 100%, and we're going to go ahead and make this a little bigger so we can tell the difference. And the next thing we're going to do is change the blurriness. We're going to change it to right about there, maybe. You can play around with this setting. It doesn't need to be anything specific. Maybe around about 10. That's 1.0. 10.0. 10.0 is good. Now be aware that when you put this effect on the layer will be blurry for the entire time. And here's where the animation comes into play. Now you basically have to animate this effect so that before the text, it's not blurry, and when the text comes in, it gets blurry. So what we're going to do is we're going to work with keyframes. Keyframes are basically what handles and controls animations. And as you can see, if you actually come over here, we're going to go ahead and add a keyframe, and these little time watches here on the sides of the effect will activate a keyframe. Now to show you what a keyframe is, I'm going to hit this drop down arrow here and go to Effects, and you'll see that our fast blur here, this is our effect. And if we were to add a keyframe here, say we check mark this, you'll see that we have a keyframe here, this little yellow dot under blurriness. Now you could control it here too. You don't need to use this window here. You could use this bottom window here as well. But basically the idea is whenever you have a keyframe, at that specific frame, the value that's entered is going to be shown at that specific frame. So at this specific frame, the value is going to be 10.0 blurriness. And from that keyframe onwards and before, it's going to stay that way until another keyframe is inserted. So for example, we delete this keyframe by pressing backspace on it. You click and press backspace. For the first part of the video, we want it to be very clear. So when do we want to start getting blurry? We want it to start getting blurry right before around 1.5 seconds into the video. So 1.5 seconds into the video, we want it to begin to get blurry. So what we're going to do is add a keyframe here for 000. This will be the start of the animation. The start of the animation is going to be at 000. We're going to start animation at 0 blurriness. Then when we get to 2 seconds, our blurriness is going to be 10. Now when you change the value, you'll get a new keyframe. A new keyframe will be generated, and if we scrub through this, it'll slowly become more blurry. Now if we watch this, you'll see it gradually gets blurry. It doesn't just, get blurry instantly. It gradually gets blurry. And the further apart these keyframes are, the slower it will get blurry. The closer the keyframes are, the quicker the effect will get blurry. That's one thing to note. So now that we have the footage get blurry, and it reaches its full blurriness of 10 at this specific keyframe at 2 seconds. Now we go through this. We want it to get clear again, right when it ends here, and our text ends at 6.15. So right here, we want it to basically become clear again. So what you can do, a little trick here, is to actually change the value here to 11 so the keyframe pops up, and then change it back to 10. So at this point right here, it's going to stay 10, and then in half a second later we want it to go back to clear. So at 7 seconds we want it to go back to clear, so we'll just go bring this down to 0. And you'll see that it becomes clear again in half a second. So the idea between keyframes is to set a starting point. This starting point is going to be your base. Your base is going to be 0 blurriness, no effect. And then we want to get to a certain blurriness level and set your second keyframe to this blurriness level, and that'll set it to 10. Throughout this entire time, it's going to stay that way until it gets to 6.5 seconds, and it'll start going down to 0 blurriness again. And this is how keyframes work. This is how animation works. If you wanted to, you know, from here on to like here, if you wanted to get really more blurry, you can add another keyframe to a higher blurriness. And if you want to go down to, say, 5 blurriness here, you can put down the 5 and another keyframe over here, and it will automatically, you know, gradually increase the blurriness and then gradually decrease again. So that's how keyframes work. Very easy. It can be a bit difficult to understand at first, but once you keyframe a few animations and a few effects, then you'll pretty much get the hang of it. So that's how you animate certain effects. Now, another thing we want to do is we want to animate this text so that it actually fades in. It doesn't just pop in, we want it to fade in. So what we're going to do is we're going to go to the start of this, and the start of this text is at, I believe it's at, what we can do is zoom in here, and it starts right here. Text comes in right here. So at 1.28. So what we're going to do is we're actually going to allow this to fade in. Now, how do we allow this to fade in? Very simple. We go down, press the down arrow here on our text layer, and we go to transform. Now, as you can see, there's several different things, and all these have keyframes as well. Everything in After Effects that you do has a keyframe, so you can animate pretty much anything. So what do you want to animate? If you wanted to animate the position, if you wanted to basically fly in, you could animate the position. At one specific time, you want it to be, you know, over here. At another specific time, you want it to be over here. Well, guess what? Then it's going to fly in this direction. So you could do that as well if you wanted to do that. But we're going to work with opacity, and opacity is going to define of how opaque this is. So we basically want it to fade in. So what we're going to do is go ahead and drag this up a little bit so we can see our timeline better. At 1.28, we're going to have it at 0 opacity, and then we're going to click our keyframe here to start it. 0 opacity. Half a second in, so 0.15 plus 28 will be 13, because it only goes to 30. It'll be at 2:13. Half a second in, we're going to be at 100. Now, if we watch this, as you can see, it fades in. Then we're going to continue to have it like that, and we're actually going to have part 1 just pop in like that. I think that's fine. We're going to have it pop in like that. And so we want it to fade out. Let's zoom in real quick to see when this text actually ends. It ends right here at 6:16. So what we want to do now is basically half a second before this, which will be at 6:01. At this point, we want it to begin to start fading out. So we're just going to go ahead and drag this up a bit as if we're going past 100, but you can, and it'll create another keyframe, which is still going to be 100. And then we go ahead half a second forward, which is to 6:16. We'll bring it down to 0. And as you can see, now it fades out. Now for this specific part, we also want the part 1 to fade out. So what we can actually do, we can actually copy these two keyframes, and we can come over here to part 1 and just paste. Alright, 1 second. Transform. Opacity. Okay, there we go. And you could actually move these to the proper location here. Now, I think if you're going to paste, you need to, the thing with pasting keyframes, the reason why they were over here was because, let me show you. If you're going to paste keyframes, you need to have it at an exact location. So if you use J, and if you use K, it'll automatically go to the previous keyframe. J will go to the previous keyframe, K will go to the next keyframe. So we're going to click J, and from here on, we'll copy and paste. We'll copy, and then we'll go to part 1 and paste. You see, there the keyframes are aligned. If you have your cursor over, if you have your marker over here and you copy from here, it's basically going to copy this white space here. So you need to have your marker at the exact spot. So use J and K to go to keyframes, and then copy and paste. So you can copy and paste animations so that you don't need to like keyframe everything. So at this point, our video footage will basically blur in and also fade in this. Then we'll have part 1 pop out here, and then it'll go through until it fades out over here. Now, one more thing that I'd like to do is, if we actually look at this title, the main subject here is the nature of Earth, and you know, the white in the back here by the waterfall is kind of distracting. It's kind of like messing the text up here. It's kind of blending in. So we want to do, we're going to add a shape. Not only are we going to add a shape to sort of add a color behind the nature of Earth, but also to add more focus on the nature of Earth rather than, you know, the nature of Earth part 1. I mean, yes, part 1 is there, but the main idea and the main focus should be on the nature of Earth. So we're going to go ahead and add a shape here. And to add shapes, we're going to go up here. And you can add different shapes here. We're just going to add a rectangle though. And our fill color is going to be black. And we're going to go ahead and bring this down so we can get a good rectangle around here. Like so. Now, when you make a shape, you'll see a new layer is created. This layer will be on top of your other layers. If you bring this layer down, you'll see that it will actually go underneath your other layers. So we're just going to go ahead and center this a bit. Right about there, that's good. Now, this photo looks pretty awkward because it's, you know, it's very dark, and we only want it to be a little dark, so we're going to make this opaque. And we're basically going to do the same thing. We're basically going to copy the same keyframes from over here. So I'm going to use my JK, and we're just going to copy these keyframes here. Copy. I'm going to come over here, paste. But the difference here is that we're going to edit these keyframes, so transform. If you double click a keyframe, you can edit. We're not going to make this to 100 opacity. We're going to make this to about 50 opacity. Maybe even less. So we're going to make this to a 25 opacity. There we go. And this keyframe as well, 25 opacity. Now, if we watch this, we have the nature of Earth with a slightly black opaque rectangle shape behind, and then it'll fade out as well. Now if we were to RAM preview this, we're just going to go ahead and let it play once. And there we go. Select no layers so we see a clear view of the picture. Now for your computer, you're not going to have my recording program takes a pretty large amount of memory, so for you this bar will be all green. But if we go ahead and click the RAM preview, I'm not sure if this footage has sound. I think it does. Let's go ahead and click RAM preview. Maybe this will. Now you'll see that it takes a longer time for After Effects to preview wherever animations are made. But one way you can speed up your RAM preview is by actually decreasing the resolution here from full to about half or even a third, and it will really speed up the RAM preview time. So there it was, pretty cool, you know. So as we can see, we're going in, we're following, and we see the blur comes in here, and then also our nature of Earth with a slightly opaque rectangle. Our part 1 pops in, we go through, both of those fade out, and we slowly sharpen in again without any blur, and it continues. And that's basically it. We basically added some simple animations to our text layers and to a shape we created to a piece of video footage in the background to create a sort of introductory slide, sort of, you know, intro video footage, whatever you want to call it. Some people call it slides, some people call it there's an intro, some people call it a bumper footage. Many different terms for it, but that's basically it, guys. A pretty easy animation. Once you get the hang of it, you can pretty much use these animations for everything. You're going to be using animations a lot in Adobe After Effects just because it's so crucial to use a little time watch here, because if you don't use it, then you cannot add effects properly. If we didn't use the time watch thing, then the entire footage will be blurry and we wouldn't get this cool effect of it blurring in and focusing on text more, and then basically coming out of the blur and sharpening into, you know, the background footage again. So, you know, pretty easy to do. Hopefully you understood the method of animations. Hopefully you understood how to create a composition. And obviously if you wanted to render this as stated in previous videos, you go to composition and you go to add to render queue, and then you would set your name here by clicking on here. Best settings you may want to keep the same, and lossless, you generally want to keep this the same as well, lossless, because you're going to be re-rendering this in Premiere Pro or Movie Maker to whatever video you're going to be using this little clip for. If you are just going to be uploading this clip right here, you could change this to a different codec. However, I do not suggest rendering your video for final production After Effects, because unless you're using the unless you use the media encoder, then that's fine. But I would suggest rendering After Effects projects as lossless and then re-rendering them in Premiere Pro or Movie Maker or in a media encoder preferably. But that's basically it. If you have any other questions, definitely leave them in the comments. And thank you for watching. I'll definitely have more Adobe After Effects tutorials coming your way. I'm going to be creating some more Photoshop tutorials as well. And that's it. Hopefully you can use these animations for your next video tutorial. And we're going to be going into more advanced animations as well in the future, but these are just some of the simple animations that you could do with some simple effects. There's obviously a lot more complicated and more advanced things you can do as well. Thank you for watching, and I hope that this video helped you out in any way. If you enjoyed this video, please leave a like. It'll really help me out. If you didn't like it, you can leave a comment as well, giving some feedback. If you have any other comments or questions, please leave them in the comments as well, and I'll do my best to answer them. I usually respond to comments within 24 to 48 hours, depending on your question and depending on how busy I am. I have plenty of other content on my channel about different software tutorials and how-to videos, so if you're interested in that type of stuff, check it out. And if you like what you're seeing, you can subscribe too. Really appreciate it. You can also check out my other channels and social media as shown on the screen right now. And with that, thank you so much everyone, and this is GSmaniamsmart, and I'll be back sooner than you think. Don't go anywhere.